It's 70 years since the construction of the notorious Burma-Siam Railway by prisoner of war of the Japanese. During the course of the Second World War, more than 250,000 soldiers were taken prisoner by the Japanese and went on to suffer years of deprivation, brutality, and, of course, enforced hard labour. Among the very few who survived is our guest now, Sir Harold Atcherley, who, throughout his time as prisoner from 1941 to 45, kept a diary and remarkably brought that diary home with him. His book, called Prisoner of Japan, is based on those diaries, and I'm delighted to welcome Sir Harold Atcherley to the show now. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. Let's take you back to your early days in Singapore. When you were posted to Singapore, I guess then it was, of anywhere you could have been posted, not a bad place to have been posted to.
That's not entirely right, in that when on our way out, we were originally going to Iraq for training prior to going to the Western Desert, and we were diverted at the last moment to Singapore, and in the meantime spent about a month in India while the powers that be at the War Office decided what to do with us.
Okay. At the time, was Singapore thought to be a vulnerable place?
Not only vulnerable, I would say, but already lost.
Right. So how long did you spend in Singapore then?
Well, we, part of my division, the 18th Division, only landed on the 21st of January, and we were in the bag on the 15th of February. So everything went very quickly.
Yes, absolutely.
We stayed in Singapore until we were ordered up, some 7,000 of us. There were other groups. One of them, Ronald Searle, was in, whom I knew quite well. Mm-hmm. We were ordered up to, we didn't know it at the time, to Thailand, Siam as it was then known, to build a railway.
Yes.
But we were not told it was to build a railway. We were merely told we were being sent up because it would be easier for the Japs to feed us rather than in Singapore.
Okay, now when you were in Singapore, just to go back for just a moment with you, you were sent to Changi prisoner of war camp, and that's a notorious place, and I believe that it was designed originally for 4,000 and 50,000 men were crammed in there.
At the time, it was relatively new. It had been designed for, I think, about 600 civilians, and initially they sent all the civilian internees there. When we finally occupied the jail after returning, the survivors returned from Burma and Thailand, we had, I think, 6,000 prisoners in it.
Okay. Now, as you say there, you were sent to Siam, or Thailand as we now know it. What was that journey like from Singapore to Thailand? I've read tales that journey itself was pretty horrific.
It was, you're right. First of all, it took about 5 days on a narrow gauge line. Each train consisted of 20 steel box wagons, and they were like ovens during the day and freezing at night. They were enclosed, apart from a sliding door, with a chain slung across the opening. And we were packed so tightly that it was impossible for everyone to sit down at the same time.
And I'm guessing there were no basic amenities like toilets, and so I imagine people were getting ill with malaria and dysentery and diarrhea and such like.
Well, I would say that certainly half, if not most of us had both malaria and dysentery. We were only allowed out twice a day to be given a small quantity of rice cooked in onion water. And the only way to relieve oneself was to hang precariously out of the wagons. Very often people couldn't reach the gap, and the weaker ones had to be supported by others to prevent them falling out of the train.
Good Lord. And so you arrive in Thailand, and what was the camp that you were sent to there?
Well, there was a staging camp when we went up at Bampong, which was near the railhead, and we were, having been told we were going up to rest camps, we then were told by the Japanese that were, in fact, the group I was with, 1,700 of us, were to go on a 200-mile march up to the Burma border, and this we had to do in the dark, because the Japanese used what was then only a track. There was not even a road connecting the two countries then, and that was pretty grisly.
Absolutely. And is it fair to say that Japanese attitudes towards surrender, because they believed that surrendering was not a thing that was to be done, contributed to the way that you eventually got treated there?
No, you're absolutely right in what you say. They were amazed when we were all sent off to Changi when we surrendered to have so many, such a vast number of prisoners. And for the first few weeks, they clearly didn't know what to do with us, because we eventually, after some weeks, we were given barbed wire, so that we literally sort of built our own perimeter for the camp.
And was it rife throughout all of the Japanese soldiers that were there, that they regarded you effectively as the lowest of the low because you had surrendered?
Well, that's true, but one should remember that the lowest of the low, until they had Allied prisoners, were the Koreans.
Yeah.
And they were, as guards, worse than the Japs. But then, of course, the Koreans were delighted, and they had lots of prisoners who were a group below them.
Yes, understood. So tell us what the camp itself was like that you eventually were settled in. What were conditions like there?
Well, we arrived at this place, Songkrai, where our main task was to build a bridge, a three-span timber bridge on two levels, one for the railway, another for the road, which we had to build before the railway. And we found just not a camp, it was just a few roofless huts with bamboo platforms on either side. There was a narrow aisle down the middle, and the width allocated to each of us was 2 feet. And Asian forced labor had been working there before us, and many had died of cholera. And in fact, their decomposed bodies still lay in one corner of the camp area.
Good Lord. And
thank God I wasn't involved myself in clearing it up, but they had to be cleared up and burned.
Awful.
And I'll just add there quickly, I don't think anyone will ever know exactly how many civilian workers died, but the best figure I've found, the most accurate, is somewhere around 100,000.
Within the Allied troops that were there, was discipline still maintained between you and your commanding officers?
Yes, it was in general. There might have been one or two minor exceptions, but one of the advantages, if you like, we had was that not having signed the Geneva Convention, the Japs had not then separated officers from men. And although I'm sure the men felt that we did far better than they did, and up to a point they were perhaps right, it wasn't much. We all were on the same food ration, which was minimal, which meant that we went out and ate whatever vegetation we could. I remember trying to catch snakes, which were very difficult to catch because they went into the middle of the masses of bamboo clusters.
It's worth bearing in mind here that the railway that you were participating in building, it was 415 kilometres long from Burma to Thailand. It's some of the most inhospitable terrain on the planet you were asked to build that railway through.
Yes, I think that I agree. That's no exaggeration. Because on the march up, which I said we did at night, we were actually frequently going up hills, and on the flatter bits it was the middle of the monsoon, it never stopped raining, and we were up to our knees in mud.
And the Japanese engineers, I believe, had estimated that it would take 5 years to complete that railway, but of course they didn't know that the secret weapon was slave labour.
That's right. And of course, where they were in fact so completely foolish was in not recognizing that they would only have that slave labor if they fed the slaves reasonably well, which they never did. And if you were sick, you were put on half rations.
Now, of course, people who have read about this or, of course, have seen the film would kind of infer that the film Bridge Over the River Kwai was how it was. Obviously, you know better. Was it like that, or was that film way off beam?
It was a good film, but bore nothing in the sense of reality. I mean, our bridge, we did our best to put in one less clamp than we were supposed to. It was very difficult to get away with. You would probably be knocked out or killed for doing if you were caught doing it. And I remember we would have taken a good century for anything to happen, but we found lots of white ants' nests, which we used to go put in food containers at night, take them around, pack them around the main supports of the bridge. We thought that was very good.
Yeah, well, I'm sure. Yeah, and of course, the film didn't give that impression at all. The film assumed that everyone was trying to get it done in the most efficient manner. But what you're basically saying is that at any time you could, an attempt was made to sabotage the whole thing.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Now, obviously, conditions during that were horrendous. You must have seen a lot of your colleagues and friends fall.
Well, I'd like to make clear that I had the bad luck to be, as far as I know, the worst camp of the lot in that respect. We were actually a group of 1,700 when we arrived at Songkrai on the Burma-Thailand border. And by the time the railway construction was complete, which I think was sometime one day next month in October, there were only 400 left. And by the end of the war, I was one of fewer than 200.
Good Lord. When you were there, did you witness any attempts to escape the camp?
Yes, I did. A friend of mine, he was an engineer officer, James Bradley, who also wrote a diary. He and about 7 others decided to try and make a break, and they had, in the jungle, secretly, naturally, been building a raft, and they set off. We actually all thought they were mad, because they themselves were no better than we were. They were starving. They had dysentery, malaria, they had jungle ulcers, they had practically everything. And of that lot, I think half, 2/3 died on the way, and they almost got to the Burmese coast when they were given away, and the 4 survivors were condemned to be shot. And in fact, one of our fluent Japanese speakers, Cyril Wilde, who was a wonderful character, he managed to get the Japanese commander prisoners up there to give them merely, I say merely, life solitary confinement, which fortunately, of course, they only had to do for, would have been, about nearly 2 years before we were released.
I have actually been to Kanchanaburi, where the bridge was built, and it's bizarre to stand in that environment and just even try to begin to imagine what went on there, because of course now it's such a peaceful place.
Yes, well, I'm interested you were there, because I remember that for two main reasons. It was the first decent food we had. We managed to buy things from the Thais. And the first thing was that four of us sat down to a meal of 2 bananas each, a tin of strawberry jam, and everything terribly sweet and not at all healthy, but by God, it was the best meal I'd had. And the other thing is that I kept a diary, as you mentioned, and when we got to Kanburi and realized we had to march so far, we dumped our packs. And in my case, in my pack was my diary. And I thought I'd never see it again. One day, the Japs, when we returned to Kanchanaburi, said that there were prisoner Singhs in a go-down over there, and if anybody wanted to claim anything, they could. And after a day or two, I wandered over and thought, well, I wonder if my pack's still around. And that was the first thing I saw. So I managed to collect it, and hence I was able to, I couldn't keep a diary up there. It was impossible. It would have been too dangerous. But I took it up again when I got back to Changi.
Wow, how extraordinary. And that's the diary which has turned into your book, Prisoner of Japan.
That's right. That book, I don't know how far I'm allowed to do a book plug.
Oh, please, plug away.
It really consists of my original diary, to which I've added my full time of 6 years in the army, the first few months of which, looking back and at the time, it was really a form of a sort of nursery dad's army. Incredibly funny.
Oh.
And then I have given an account of what I learnt after the war from other people's diaries, not least Ronald Searle's, but also some official documents, and in which I had confirmation of what, in fact, we were told, and I knew this because I was divisional intelligence officer, that when the Allies were to attack the Far East and take it back, all prisoners on the island of Singapore were to be put in trucks, taken to the beaches and machine gunned.
Good Lord.
And there's no doubt that we all of us who survived, owe our lives, first of all, to the dropping of the atom bomb, and also the fact that one didn't get cholera, because I can't remember a single man who got cholera and survived for more than 24, 36 hours.
Amazing. Do you remember, Sir Harold, the day that you realised that you were now a free man?
Not as clearly as I should, because we kept radios going pretty well the whole time. And if one had been caught, and I think only one person, as far as I know, was, you would have been shot on the spot. And when, a few days before the atom bomb both of them were dropped, radio, where I was, outside Changi Jail in the coolie quarters, was not operating, something wrong with it. And the man doing so only managed to get it going again 2 or 3 days afterwards. And it was only then that we heard the dropping of the atom bombs, and a day or two later we realized that they'd given in.
Yeah.
What we also noticed was a rather interesting change in attitude by our mostly Korean guards, but also the Japanese. And this was obviously due to the fact they had had news of something, and I well remember that they were not aware of such a thing as an atom bomb. Nobody did until they'd been dropped and learnt what it was.
Of course.
They thought there'd been a major earthquake in Japan.
I see. Well, I have to let people know that not only have you got your book, Prisoner of Japan, A Personal War Diary, it's a subject of a major documentary, including interviews with your good self. And also, I believe that there is yet another film about this whole thing called The Railway Man coming out with Colin Firth and Nicole Kidman.
That is right. That is based on, I think, one man. I didn't know him, but I think he was particularly badly treated. I think deals, and I don't belittle it at all for that reason, it deals essentially with one man's experience, which was, in his case, particularly ghastly.
Yes. Well, we'll mention the book again for you, because if anyone's book deserves plugging, it's yours, Sir Harold. It's Prisoner of Japan, A Personal War Diary. Sir Harold Atcherley, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's been an absolute privilege to talk to you, sir.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for your company.